Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 16, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. Unfortunately, Clyde is one of those individuals who expects over-the-counter medications to show some beneficial sign within 10 to 20 minutes, like it is with a couple of paracetamol tablets. Take 2 of those for a headache and they work their magic in no time at all. But half an hour after taking the first valerian tablet, he wasn't feeling the slightest nuance of relief, so he decided to take another one. An hour later he still didn't notice any difference to his ever-increasing state of agitation. So nothing ventured, nothing gained, and in for a penny, in for a pound, he swallowed 2 more tablets. Surely 4 valerian tablets in an hour and a half should do something to improve his state of well-being, he pondered. Surely to Christ. Assuming, of course, that the damn things work. They did. It was 4:35 and Clyde had taken the final 2 tablets and seated himself at his desk. Although why he did that he wasn't sure. Perhaps he thought he might be able to pass the time by surfing the web. Or maybe there was a glimmer of hope that he might be able to write. Or if not write, then read what he had written. Even though he hadn't been able to do that the last time, he thought he would a week ago. Or maybe it was longer than that. But whatever the reason, or maybe there wasn't one, there he sat looking at, or maybe he was staring at the screensaver. He wasn't sure. For he was in such a peculiar state of mind, now the likes of which he had never experienced before, that he couldn't make up his mind if he was in 2 minds, or none at all because of it. How strange was that? In fact, he wasn't sure where he was anymore, which was even stranger. He was feeling pretty relaxed though, there was no doubt about that. So relaxed that he felt like he was as light as a feather, and could float if he had a mind to. But where his mind was he didn't know. Then all of a sudden he didn't know anything at all, which wasn't surprising. And as Clyde slept, a sleep so deep that nothing in this world or any other was capable of rousing him from, 2 white apparitions suddenly appeared and floated above his desk, looking down on him, which was unfortunate for Clyde, being in the state he was, because for the first time he would have been able to look upon their faces and recognise who they reminded him of. As for Harriet and Henrietta, only they would know the reason for their visit, and they weren't saying anything. They did, however, look at each other with what could only be called worried faces, so perhaps they needed to satisfy themselves that all was well with their benefactor, and what they now saw troubled them. They were more than aware of his plans for later tonight went high with anticipation. The outcome they were certainly putting an end once and for all to their suffering. Now, though, they were full of uncertainty. Past clandestine visitations had told them that he rarely slept through the day. So unless he was just napping to save his energy, there was a very real possibility he had taken a sedative to relieve the anxiety they knew he was feeling. And that did indeed trouble them. However, at that moment, that was only a possibility. So in order to gauge his degree of unconsciousness, there was only one thing they could do, and that was for both in turn to pass through him. Asleep he would surely wake from the energy force their auras generated, but otherwise he wouldn't. He didn't. Now they could only wait and watch over him, for to pass through him again would be detrimental to them. Come midnight and still Clyde slept, but not so Sandy. "What's bothering you, my love?" Alma asked Sandy as he sat on the edge of his side of the bed. "It's Clyde, isn't it?" "Yes." "Then you must do what you think is right." 10 minutes later Sandy drove through the cemetery gates. A minute on he drove through the gates again. Clyde's vehicle nowhere to be seen. Something had happened. Bringing his vehicle to a curbside stop opposite the front gate of Clyde's place several minutes later, Sandy had noticed three things all but at the same time. Clyde's vehicle was parked close to the garage. He saw what he thought was the light in Clyde's office coming out of the two front double windows, and there was a telltale glow of the kitchen light at the end of the hall. 15 minutes after midnight, his car here, the office lights on, and the front door open. Oh yes, something was indeed not right. In a panic now, Sandy wasted no time abandoning his car and heading towards the house, glad to find when he reached the screen door that it wasn't locked. Flinging it open, then running to, then through the open door to Clyde's office, only to be stopped dead in his tracks. Sandy had caught a glimpse of Clyde slumped in the chair at his desk, head down, arms limp, seemingly dead to the world. But that wasn't what had froze him to the spot, eyes wide, heart racing, terrified, and mumbling, "Holy Mother of God, I don't believe it, I don't believe it." For there, floating either side of Clyde were, to Sandy's mind, two ghosts. Yep, good old Sandy Harold Merriweather, who had never seen anything stranger than his next-door neighbour with a hair in rollers wearing a mud pack, was staring at what he couldn't believe he was, but had to because they were there right before his bulging eyes. And at that moment Sandy wanted to be anywhere but here. And he would have been, except for one thing. He thought Clyde was dead to the world, literally. And with the real expectation that his friend was dead or dying, Sandy somehow managed to overcome his fear and slowly approach him. He was mindful of the two ghosts. Oh God, was he mindful of them? But if there was a chance he could save his friend, it was a chance he was prepared to take regardless. Then the strangest thing happened. At least it was strange to Sandy's mind, because he didn't know what to expect. As he came close to Clyde, the two ghosts retreated. Not far, a yard or two, as if they were aware of his intentions and didn't want to impede him. At Clyde's left side now, he reached out and touched his forehead, then sighed with relief at what he felt. Warmth. Or was it a figment of his imagination, because it's what he wanted to feel? Better make sure, he thought, placing the tips of his right fore and middle fingers on the side of Clyde's neck, just below the jawline. Sandy had never done a first aid course, but he had watched enough medical shows on television to know where to place his fingers to feel for the carotid pulse, although it wasn't easy as those shows made it out to be. Finally, however, after moving his fingertips slowly over the general area, he managed to feel the proof of his moment's earlier assumption, and he sighed again. Clyde's pulse was strong and regular, but why, he wondered, was he out like a light? Then, just like that, it dawned on him. "Oh, bloody hell, Clyde," he muttered. "You took something, didn't you? I should have stayed with you," Sandy regretted, knowing how uneasy he was. Realising at that moment, caught up as he was with his friend's well-being, that he had forgotten about the two ghosts. Sandy looked over his right shoulder to see them. Well, he wasn't sure if they were standing on or floating a little above the floor side to side. But whatever, their hands were clasped together close to their mouths, fingers knitted, their eyes so sad and testimony to what they were feeling, that all of a sudden Sandy's fear was replaced with an empathy so profound that his heart went out to them, and he smiled. He had to help them. Shaking Clyde, he ordered, "Come on, Clyde, wake up, we've got work to do here." But Clyde didn't respond. Continuing to shake, Sandy raised his voice. "Come on, Clyde, wake up, goddamn you! Wake up for Christ's sake!" Clyde stirred, but he didn't open his eyes. It was time for drastic action. Returning to Clyde's side following a quick visit to the kitchen, Sandy pulled the top of Clyde's shirt and singled away from his chest and unceremoniously slotted a full plastic ice cube tray fresh from the freezer against Clyde's bared chest, then worked it up, down and all around, saying as he did so, "Come on, Clyde, open your goddamn eyes, will you? Clyde, wake up, wake up!" Clyde's eyelids fluttered, opened, closed, a promising sign that prompted Sandy to grab his shoulders and begin to shake him vigorously as he said, "That's it, Clyde. Open them eyes. Come on, Clyde. Wakey wake, wakey wake." "What?" Clyde muttered, opening his eyes. What the... Ceasing to shake Clyde, Sandy gently slapped his left cheek, saying, "You awake now, Clyde?" Raising his head, Clyde looked at Sandy's smiling face and said, "Awake? Yes, awake, awake." A couple of seconds later, and he was truly awake. "Oh, shit, shit!" And with those words, Clyde sprang to his feet, frantically pulling the tail of his shirt and singlet free of his trousers to dislodge the ice cube tray, although he didn't know what it was until it thudded to the floor at his feet. "Yes? Yep, I guess you're awake now," Sandy said, and then laughed. "Jesus," Clyde said as he briskly rubbed the palm of both hands over his shirt front. "What the hell happened?" Looking down at the ice cube tray, "And how the hell did that find its way inside my clothes, for Christ's sake?" "I put it there," Sandy said matter-of-factly. "'Cause it's the only way I could think of to wake you." "Yes, well, it certainly did that," Clyde said testily. "Don't get the shits with me, Clyde. After all, I wasn't the one who was supposed to be elsewhere at this time of night doing you-know-what, instead of sitting in their chair dead to the world." Stunned, Clyde asked, "What time is it, Sandy?" Glancing at his watch, "Near on midnight. With a nervous smile, Clyde muttered, "No, not possible. You're having me on, aren't you?" Sandy shook his head. "Fucking hell, how did it get to be that late? I mean, I remember sitting down here, and the next thing I know, I open my eyes and see your face, and then..." "And here you are," Sandy said. "And I might add, with two visitors who..." Sandy looked over his shoulder to where the sisters were the last time he looked, but they were gone. "Yes, well, they were right here a few minutes ago." Incredulous, Clyde said, "You mean the sisters were here and you saw them?" "Uh-huh. Scared the living daylights out of me when I first saw them, they did. Came bursting through the door, I did, thinking there was something wrong with you after I went to the cemetery and found you weren't there. But they were, and by the look on their faces they were really worried." "I'll be damned." He thought of asking Sandy what the sisters looked like, but dismissed it. After all, what was the point, and what was there to gain from someone else's perspective? "And so will they be if we don't get our asses into gear," Sandy postulated. "We?" Clyde said. "You said we. Does that mean you're going to help me?" "Of course I'm going to help you. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. Now would I?" Clyde said but two words, a heartfelt "Thank you." 10 minutes later, Clyde's Volvo station wagon loaded, the front door of the house secured. Clyde nuked 2 mugs of leftover tea, both as black as the ace of spades and piping hot that, with a handful of biscuits, went down a real treat. Although Sandy had only room for one, an undunked ginger nut just in case, followed by a smoke, perhaps his last as a free man. Neither spoke as they drove toward the cemetery, both lost to their own train of thoughts. With Sandy it was, "I can't believe I'm doing this. I said I wouldn't time and time again, and do I listen? Oh no. Harder still to believe Alma is going along with it. You live with someone for so long that you think you know everything about them, but you don't. I wonder if she thinks the same about me now. Probably. Still, I guess there's no fool like an old fool. Ghosts and demons and pyramids and UFOs, and now off to desecrate a grave. Geez." Clyde was thinking, "I'm sure glad Sandy is with me. Glad too that he came along when he did. Otherwise I don't think I'd be here now. Still be sleeping, I reckon. Probably would have slept right through until morning. I'm sorry I missed the sisters though. I sure hope they make another appearance, but knowing my luck they probably won't. Bet their father will. Bet my life on that. He's probably waiting for us right now, and God knows what he has in store for us. Maybe the sisters are waiting for us too. Lend a helping hand when the shit well and truly hits the fan, if they're capable of doing so. But then what could they do? Pull a face and scare him away? Yeah, right, and pigs might fly. You know, Sandy said as they neared the cemetery, I've got a real bad feeling about this. Me too. And it's not just because we're breaking the law. Driving through the cemetery gate, Sandy said, maybe we should just turn around and give it a miss. But it was too late to do that. Unbeknown to Sandy and Clyde, the very instant Sandy spoke the word miss, the two massive wrought iron gates silently broke the years of rust that held them in place and slowly began to close. And by the time Clyde brought his vehicle to a stop less than half a minute later, the gates were fully closed. Something that didn't go unnoticed by Clyde, who, after spotting them so in the headlights, said, I think we're already fucked, Sandy. Then he pointed just as Sandy opened his mouth to say, what do you mean? Saying instead when he spotted the closed gates, oh, that's just great, isn't it? Now, what do we do? We do what we came here to do, Clyde said, his calm voice belying the fear he felt. Clyde had parked his car on the opposite side of the turnaround in order to be closer to Charles MacArthur's grave and to offer a quick escape once the job was done. But now he was wishing he hadn't. To see the power of what they were up against was something they didn't need to see and know of. And now they had a new. They were more fearful now than they had been since leaving Clyde's house. After turning off the headlights and the engine, Clyde said, come on, Sandy, adding as he opened his door, let's get this show on the road. At the rear of the station wagon, the tailgate up, Clyde slipped the torch band onto his head, then passed the other torch to Sandy. Grab what you can, Clyde said to Sandy. Then follow me. Charles MacArthur's grave is over that way, Clyde said, pointing. Sandy did as he was instructed, pocketing the ball of string, then gathering up the 4 garden stakes, roll of hessian, wondering now as he did, when helping to load the station wagon, what plan Clyde had for them. With the stakes and hessian held tight under his underarm to his left side, torch in hand, Sandy grabbed the crowbar and waited as Clyde shouldered the auger. Then, leaving the tailgate up, Clyde switched on his head-mounted torch and without a word set off at a brisk but wobbly pace with Sandy right behind him, hoping like hell that Clyde wouldn't stumble and fall. Being so dark, Sandy was relying on Clyde to keep his head down and light their way. And with his head canted to one side in order to see that way, it would only take a split second if Clyde propped or fell, for Sandy to fall too. For there would be no way he would be able to avoid him being as close to him as he was. But so far so good. Just take it nice and easy, Clyde, okay? Sandy muttered under his breath. For Sandy it was the longest 100 metres or so he had ever walked, made all the worse because of where he was and what he was about to do. But finally they reached the gravesite and grounded their load. And it was then that Sandy asked, what do you need the stakes and hessian for? Clyde told him, and for a moment or two Sandy thought Clyde was being paranoid. But when he looked in the direction of Castle Street he had second thoughts. He could only see darkness. And because they were elevated and out in the open, the idea of a screen made sense. Perfect sense. And not only because of the highly unlikely happening, but also the comfortable feeling of not being exposed. Clyde, Sandy thought, is a genius. Before Clyde returned to his car to gather the jack, wrecking bar, hammer and 2 cans of fuel, he told Sandy what he planned to do. And Sandy wasn't surprised to learn that Clyde had figured out an easier way to move the ledger. But then he is a genius. With Clyde gone, Sandy was feeling jittery. He could see the interior light of the Volvo and knew Clyde wasn't far away. But it did little to comfort him. In fact, it did nothing to comfort him. Sandy had never been afraid of being alone in the bush. But here was different. Here the things that went bump in the night might not be a harmless animal. And the mere thought of what they could be if it happened well and truly irked him. He had brought his makings with him, of course, but it wasn't a cigarette he wanted, but a stiff drink it was. 3 fingers of a stiff drink, as a matter of fact, closely followed by another. Then a cigarette would be real good. Clyde had asked him if he was going to treat himself to something special, and he had said he couldn't think of anything he needed. But now he could. A fine silver hip flask full with the finest Scotch whisky money could buy. But isn't that always the way? Sandy shrugged. Yep, that's always the way. You say something, Sandy? Clyde said. Just thinking out loud is all I was doing. Anyhow, Clyde said, if you can hammer those stakes in the ground and tie the hessian to them, I'll get busy moving the slab. Okay? No worries, Clyde. No worries, Sandy thought, picking up the first stake. I'm worried sick, as he hammered the stake into the ground. Bloke's insane to be doing this, picking up the second stake. Downright stupid thing to be doing, hammering it into the ground. And so he went on as he went about his task. Clyde, however, wasn't thinking along those lines, busy as he was. His thoughts were based on the job at hand. I sure hope the pressure doesn't break the plinth as he worked the jack lever. If it does, we'll have to do it the hard way, as he felt the hydraulic ram gain purchase. Nice and easy there as he settled into a steady rhythm. Nice and easy. By the time Sandy began to hammer the third stake into the ground, Clyde was both pleased and relieved to notice and hear the movement of the ledger. The grating hollow sound of stone against stone alerting Sandy. You got it moving, Clyde, Sandy said, pausing momentarily. Clyde nodded, his action only noticed by the bobbing light. Way to go, Sandy said as he recommenced hammering. Won't be long now, he thought, picking up the final stake. And to think Clyde planned to do all this by himself as he hammered the last stake into the ground. Man's not only a genius, as he began to tie the hessian to the first stake, but a masochist as well. By the time Sandy had the hessian tied to the 4 stakes, Clyde had finished with the jack and was preparing to move the slab with the crowbar. Charles MacArthur had been laid to rest near on 75 years ago, the result of which, Clyde expected, would have settled and compacted the soil quite substantially. But when he drove the crowbar into the soil and felt how easy it gave way, he was surprised as much as he was relieved, although his feelings had nothing to do with the crowbar, but for the subsequent use of the auger. But he was nevertheless surprised how easy it was to lever the slab forward. So easy, in fact, that when Sandy made to join him, he said, "No need to, Sandy. So how about you get the auger ready? You know, check the fuel tank and such, because I'll have this thing far enough away to work in no time at all." To Sandy, the auger was a familiar tool, having used one many times in the past when erecting fencing on rural properties both near and far. And while this particular model was new, it was still basically the same as those of a bygone era. Checking the fuel tank first, he noticed it was all but full. More than enough and no need to bother topping it up. Spark plug lead firmly attached, check. A quick once over of the screw shaft and he was satisfied all was as it should be. "We're right to go here, Clyde." "Here too, Sandy," Clyde said, the metallic clunk of the crowbar impacting the ground giving the all clear too. Lifting the auger to Clyde's outstretched hand and making sure he had a firm grip before letting go, Sandy then scrambled atop the slab where, noticing Clyde standing on hallowed ground, Sandy found himself a little reluctant to do so. "I understand how you feel, Sandy," Clyde said with utmost sincerity. "And if you don't feel you can do it, then don't. Just stand on the edge of the ledger and you'll be able to grab the other hand grip from there." Sandy did just that. "You ready to go?" Clyde asked. "Ready as I'll ever be." And with that said, Clyde started the auger. "Here we go, Sandy," Clyde yelled over the noise of the motor. Then he opened the throttle. But what happened next scared the living daylights out of them. Clyde had expected the screw shaft to find the going easy, and it did. Far too easy. Before Clyde and Sandy could do anything to stop it, let alone release their hands from the 2 grips, the entire length of the shaft disappeared into the ground quick as a flash, dragging them down with it. And only then did Clyde release the throttle. "Fucking hell!" Sandy yelled over the still idling motor. I think I did me back in. I don't think I have. I know I have, Clyde replied. Ignoring the pain in his neck and still bent over, Clyde grabbed both hand grips and worked the auger in a screwing motion as he tried to pull it up and out of the ground. But something was stopping him from doing so. Must be caught on a root or a rock, Clyde said, a little breathless. Catch your breath, Clyde, Sandy said. Then we'll both give it a go. They did, finally managing after much grunting, groaning and a tirade of expletives to pull it free, and with it, embedded in the tip, the cause of their troubles. It's a bit of wood, Sandy said, stating the obvious. Killing the motor and with Sandy steadying the auger, Clyde bent low from the waist, winced from the sudden short stabbing pain in his lower back, then reached out and managed to work the piece of timber free from its host, noting straight away that a small section of the rotted timber wasn't. In fact, the small piece of timber still had substantial substance and a tight dark grain. I know what this is, Clyde said, standing tall. It's a piece of the coffin. Has to be. And that's when all hell broke loose. Oh shit, Clyde, Sandy yelled as the ledger under his feet began to tremble. The only noise that of the granite slab as it chattered against the encasement edging. The auger forgotten the moment he lost his grip, and it toppled sideways, the weight of the motor taking it over the encasement edge, then dropping to the ground. What have we done? What have we done? But Clyde didn't answer him. Clyde was too busy trying to remain upright as the earth beneath his feet shook violently. Made all the worse because, with every backwards and side movement he made, arms spread as counterbalances, like a tightrope walker in a high wind, it was as if someone was plunging a knife in his back. Such was the pain from his earlier exertion. But when the ground opened up and swallowed him waist high a minute later, he didn't hold back. Ah! He screamed. Sandy! Ah! Oh Christ! Help me, Sandy! Help me! Please! Sandy dropped to his knees on the ledge and began to crawl toward Clyde, fearful any moment that the bucking slab would cast him off into the ground, then fall on top of him. I'm coming, Clyde! Just hang on! Please, hang on! Oh God, please don't let him die, he whispered. But by the sound of Clyde's frantic pleas, he feared the worst. Then the worst happened. Just as Sandy grabbed the edge of the ledger, it exploded upwards, and he lost his grip, slid backwards then to his left and went sprawling to the ground as the ledger tilted, hung precariously momentary, then slowly slid toward him as he lay flat on his back, eyes wide with terror, arms outstretched in a natural reflex, but totally futile action to fend off the massive weight, intent on crushing him to death. Whew. You know what? I think I'll call it quits on that because I have made a lot of mistakes in this reading. So I want to thank you for watching. And until next time, bye for now. However, at that moment, that was only a possibility. So in order to gauge his degree of consciousness, bloody hell. Ah, good grief, I keep making mistakes. Bloody hell. You now.